What is unfolding across the United States over the next several days is not a typical summer weather pattern. This is a multi-phase, severe weather event that is going to put tens of millions of people at risk, not once. We are talking about a powerful jet stream diving south into the Great Lakes and Ohio Valley today, fueling organized severe thunderstorm clusters capable of producing significant damaging winds, large hail, and tornadoes across a massive section of the Midwest. We are talking about the same severe weather threat shifting east tomorrow into the mid-Atlantic and the Carolinas, where a strengthening low-pressure system is going to drive another round of organized, dangerous storms for tens of millions of people. And then, just when you think the pattern might finally be winding down, something genuinely rare is going to develop off the East Coast. A rare summer coastal low-pressure system is expected to spin up late this week, bringing widespread heavy rainfall and a rising flash flood threat across much of the Northeast. And beyond even that, the extended pattern stays active enough that Friday, Saturday, and even early next week deserve your close attention. This is a weather week that demands you stay locked in from the very beginning all the way through the weekend, because this pattern is not going to let up for quite some time. So let's get into the full breakdown of what is coming. Starting right now with today's severe weather threat, because there is a lot to cover and the clock is already ticking on this event. We begin with what is happening right now across the Great Lakes and Ohio Valley, where the Storm Prediction Center has placed a large portion of the central United States under an enhanced risk of severe weather. That enhanced risk covers a substantial and heavily populated corridor. We are talking about southeast Wisconsin, northeastern Illinois, the vast majority of Indiana, most of Ohio, and the bulk of Michigan. That is not a small geographic footprint by any measure. That is an enormous swath of the Midwest where organized, powerful thunderstorms are expected to develop and move through today, and where the threat of significant damaging wind gusts is the primary concern driving the entire forecast. Beyond that enhanced risk zone, a slight risk of severe weather extends outward, reaching up into the upper peninsula of Michigan and back down toward Kentucky. And then the marginal threat, which represents the outer edge of today's organized severe weather area, stretches all the way from Nashville, Tennessee, through Washington, D.C., and even includes New York City. When you add all of that together, there is an extraordinary number of people sitting inside some level of severe weather risk today. The Storm Prediction Center does not issue these risk designations casually, and when you see a corridor this wide covered under an enhanced outlook, you take it seriously and you prepare accordingly, because these storms will not wait for you to be ready. Now, let's be very specific about the individual threats today, because they are not all equal, and understanding which one is the headline concern matters greatly for how you prepare and respond. The single biggest concern, the threat completely dominating this forecast, is the potential for significant damaging wind gusts. The Storm Prediction Center has actually indicated that a SIG 2 wind threat designation may need to be added to future outlooks for today. That designation is meaningful because it specifically means wind gusts of 85 miles per hour or greater would be on the table with the most intense thunderstorm clusters. If the Storm Prediction Center does issue that SIG 2 wind threat designation, it would almost certainly trigger a moderate risk of severe weather being placed over portions of this area, a major upgrade to an already serious forecast. The areas most at risk for the most extreme wind gusts today are Chicago, Milwaukee, and extreme southwestern Michigan. If you live in any of those cities or anywhere in the corridor in between, this is the threat that should have your complete and undivided attention this morning and all the way through the afternoon. Wind gusts at the 85-plus mile per hour threshold bring down large trees onto homes, snap power lines mid-pole, cause real structural damage to buildings, and create genuinely dangerous driving conditions on highways and surface roads alike. This is not a storm to minimize, dismiss, or wait out casually without proper preparation in place. Moving outward from that core zone of highest concern, there is still a real and meaningful risk of scattered to isolated damaging wind gusts for people living across Cleveland, Pittsburgh, and back toward the broader East Coast corridor. The wind threat there is lower in intensity relative to what the Chicago-Milwaukee corridor is facing, but it is absolutely real and worth monitoring closely throughout the entire day. Do not make the mistake of assuming that because you are outside the enhanced risk zone, you are entirely safe from damaging conditions. The second threat on today's list is large hail. To put this in the right perspective, hail is going to be the lowest priority concern for this particular event. That does not mean ignore it, but relative to the dominant wind threat in today's pattern, hail is clearly and significantly secondary. The overall wind setup for today is so dominant that hail potential, while present in the atmosphere, takes a definitive back seat in terms of what you need to be most focused on. And then there is the tornado threat for today, which is present but on the lower end of the concern spectrum. This is a low-end tornado potential, not non-existent, but not the headline threat driving this forecast. The highest tornado threat in today's setup is expected to reside near Lake Michigan, with specific focus on areas near Rockford, Chicago, and northern Indiana. It would not be surprising at all if the Storm Prediction Center added a 5% tornado probability to a future outlook as data continues to come in, but as of now, the tornado risk is real, localized, and clearly lower in priority than the wind threat. Let's talk about timing, because this is genuinely where today's forecast gets complicated, and being transparent about that complexity is critically important for everyone in the threat zone. This is a very tough forecast. It was a difficult forecast yesterday as well, and it remains genuinely challenging right now. The core challenge comes down to small-scale atmospheric features and whether there is sufficient forcing within the atmosphere to sustain organized, severe weather development through the full course of the day. Last night across Wisconsin and Minnesota, storms were very minimal until after 10 o'clock in the evening, which was a frustrating outcome that left a large number of people watching and waiting with very little happening around them. That kind of unpredictability is not unusual with this type of setup, and it is precisely why the next several hours of incoming data are so critical to narrowing down the picture. Right now, a cluster of thunderstorms is developing across northern Wisconsin. If you are just now waking up and checking the weather situation for the first time this morning, understand that this is not a wait-and-see day. This is a day where you need to have a plan in place before any storms arrive, because the window between storm development and storm arrival can be very short when a fast-moving line is involved. Over the next several hours, that cluster is expected to intensify as it tracks southward toward Milwaukee. By as early as 9 to 10 o'clock this morning, significant damaging wind gusts, and possibly even an emerging tornado threat, could be approaching southern Wisconsin near Milwaukee and pushing down toward Rockford and Chicago. There could also be storm activity beginning to develop over portions of Michigan during the late morning hours as the overall system expands eastward. As we move into the early afternoon, that line of thunderstorms is expected to continue tracking through the Chicago area. We are talking about roughly a 100-mile difference in storm placement even by 2 o'clock this afternoon. A 5-hour difference between model runs is producing a 100-mile difference in storm location. That is an enormous spread, and it makes pinpoint hour-by-hour timing forecasting essentially impossible at this stage. What does all of that uncertainty mean for you practically? It means that regardless of exactly where those storms ultimately set up geographically, there's going to be a significant wind threat with whatever storms are active today. Wind gusts as high as 90 miles per hour are possible with this line during the morning and afternoon hours. The uncertainty in this forecast is not about whether the threat is real. It is purely about where exactly it lands. Through the early afternoon, storms should be moving across northern Illinois and Michigan, potentially approaching Fort Wayne, Peoria, and Lafayette, depending on which model solution verifies. By 3 to 4 o'clock, that line should be pushing farther south towards Springfield, Indianapolis, and Columbus. Throughout all of that progression, the widespread damaging wind threat remains firmly on the table. The honest bottom line for today, we could end up with an intense, widespread line of thunderstorms producing major wind damage across a very large multi-state area, or we could end up with something more broken and clustered, producing more scattered wind damage and an isolated tornado or two. Both outcomes are genuinely within the range of what today's atmosphere can support, and the next several hours of incoming data will be critical in narrowing that picture down. If you live anywhere in the enhanced, slight, or marginal risk zones today, and that covers an enormous area from Milwaukee through the Ohio Valley and all the way toward the East Coast, you need to be actively watching the weather throughout the day. Have multiple ways to receive warnings ready and confirmed before any storms arrive. Do not rely on a single alert system, because systems can fail at precisely the worst possible moment. The second conditions start to deteriorate in your area. You want to know immediately and without any delay. With today's threat clearly established, let's shift our full attention to Tuesday, because the severe weather pattern absolutely does not end when Monday's storms finally clear out. Tomorrow, Tuesday, the entire severe weather threat shifts eastward toward the mid-Atlantic and the Carolinas. The relatively good news within this portion of the forecast is that Tuesday's setup is going to be somewhat easier to predict than today's has been. The reason for that improved predictability is the development of an intensifying low-pressure system centered over Pennsylvania and New York by Tuesday afternoon. That defined low-pressure system gives meteorologists a much cleaner framework for understanding where severe weather is going to develop and when. The expectation for Tuesday is scattered to numerous damaging wind gusts across a broad corridor stretching from Philadelphia back through Knoxville and Charlotte. The highest wind threat on Tuesday is centered on Richmond, Raleigh, and Charlotte. If you live in or near any of those three cities, Tuesday afternoon is when your weather guard needs to be fully and completely up, well before any storms arrive. Beyond winds, there is a risk of large to very large hail on Tuesday, with that hail threat most concentrated across North Carolina and Virginia. If you are parking your vehicle outside on Tuesday and you live in either of those states, consider moving it into a garage or covered structure before the storms arrive. because the hail threat is real enough to cause significant damage to exposed vehicles and property. And then there is the tornado potential for Tuesday. The Storm Prediction Center is watching a scenario where a few tornadoes could develop during the afternoon and evening hours, with the primary risk zone centered on Washington, D.C., Norfolk, Richmond, Charlottesville, and back into Raleigh. Model guidance is showing a line or cluster of thunderstorms developing near Washington, D.C. and Charlottesville during the mid-afternoon, and that feature could produce an isolated tornado or two embedded within it by around 6 o'clock Eastern Time. Storm coverage on Tuesday should stretch from central New York back through Virginia, with severe weather considerably more likely across eastern Virginia than farther north into New York. Most of Tuesday's severe weather should be winding down by around 9 o'clock in the evening as those storms push eastward toward Virginia Beach and the Salisbury area. If you live anywhere in the Tuesday impact zone, make sure your weather alert systems are active and ready well before you go to sleep tonight. Now we arrive at the part of this forecast that is genuinely remarkable, because what is expected to develop on Wednesday is something you almost never see happen in the month of July. A rare coastal low-pressure system is expected to spin up just off the coast of New England beginning on Wednesday. To be completely clear, this system is not tropical in any way. It is not a hurricane or a tropical storm, but it behaves in every practical sense like something most people associate exclusively with the dead of winter. This is essentially a summer nor'easter, and that combination of a nor'easter-type coastal low developing in late July is so genuinely unusual that it is drawing significant and sustained attention from the meteorological community. Coastal lows of this character in late July are rare enough that many forecasters are describing this as something they have not seen develop during the summer months in a very long time. Two primary impacts from this system: heavy rainfall with a real flash flood threat and strong gusty winds along the coastal zone. On the rainfall side, widespread totals of 1 to 3 inches are expected across New York City, Bridgeport, Providence, and Boston. Those are the broad area-wide numbers that most of southern New England will experience across the full duration of the event. But embedded within that broader footprint, certain locations are going to pick up significantly more than the area average. Some spots could easily see 5 to 6 inches of rain by the time the system moves out, and those are precisely the locations where the flash flooding risk becomes genuinely serious and potentially life-threatening, where drainage systems become overwhelmed, rivers and streams rise rapidly beyond their banks, and roads turn into waterways that trap vehicles and endanger people. Flash flooding is one of the most deadly weather hazards, specifically because it develops quickly and catches people completely off guard, particularly during nighttime hours when alertness is naturally lower. On the wind side, the area around Southampton and Brookhaven on Long Island is looking at gusts that could reach 50 to 60 miles per hour as we move into late Wednesday and early Thursday. Those wind speeds are more than sufficient to bring down trees, knock out power across broad areas, and create hazardous conditions both on the roads and on the water. Anyone with boating plans along the Long Island coast or southern New England on Wednesday or Thursday needs to be rethinking those plans right now. The coastal low is expected to linger through at least Thursday afternoon and evening, making this a prolonged event rather than a quick-hitting system. That extended duration is what most significantly elevates the flash flooding concern. Moderate rainfall rates maintained over many consecutive hours produce totals that accumulate into truly significant numbers, and ground that may already be saturated from prior rainfall has virtually no capacity to absorb additional water quickly. Model uncertainty remains on the exact track of this coastal low. The European model is currently pulling the system a bit more inland compared to other guidance. If the low stays close to the coast or just offshore, it will likely intensify further and become a considerably bigger problem for southern New England and Long Island specifically. The situation will continue to evolve, and checking updates frequently through Tuesday and into Wednesday will make a real practical difference in how well prepared you are. If you live in southern New England, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, or anywhere along Long Island, this is the system to build your awareness around for the middle of the week. Heavy rain, potential flash flooding, and gusty coastal winds are all firmly on the table from Wednesday into Thursday. Make sure you know where your area's flood-prone roads are and avoid those roads entirely if heavy rain is falling. It is never worth the risk of driving through floodwaters, no matter how shallow they appear. Heading into Friday and Saturday, a storm system is being watched carefully as it approaches the Mississippi River Valley. Current signals suggest flooding rainfall and isolated to scattered, severe weather across that region over those 2 days. But model guidance is showing considerable disagreement about where exactly the most impactful weather ultimately sets up. Friday and Saturday are worth actively watching if you live anywhere across the Mississippi River Valley. Sunday hints at the possibility of some level of severe weather across the far northern plains into Minnesota, but confidence there remains genuinely low right now. And into early next week, the pattern appears to remain broadly active with additional storm systems potentially working across the Midwest. All updates will continue to come as confidence on each of those systems improves through the coming days of the week. Here is the key takeaway from everything covered today across this entire forecast. This week is one of those forecasting weeks that demands active attention every single day without exception. Multiple overlapping threats, a genuinely rare summer coastal low, significant model uncertainty in the extended range, and the potential for continued activity well into next week. This is the kind of pattern where staying informed is not optional, it is essential for your safety and your family's safety. Please subscribe to the channel if you have not already done so. Turn on your notifications so you do not miss live coverage or critical updates as this event evolves through the week. If conditions escalate significantly today across the Midwest and Ohio Valley, there is a very real chance of live coverage as those storms develop and push southward and eastward. We will be watching every data update as it comes in, and we will be here with you every single step of the way through what is shaping up to be one of the most active and complex weather weeks of the entire summer. Thank you so much for watching today. All right, so we will see you in the next update or live the moment the weather demands it.